Only here on the Night Team tonight. George Hawkins was a small business owner and Kentucky constable when he was last seen alive in Newport, Kentucky in 1961. His daughters say his disappearance was never investigated by police in northern Kentucky. Tonight, the Unsolved team is digging into this mystery of the missing constable, finding the Cleveland Mafia may have played a part. Here's Shay McAllister.
Northern Kentucky in the 1960s had a reputation. Newport was known as the original Sin City, the Cleveland Mafia completely in control.
They really owned everything in northern Kentucky from, pardon my French, but the whorehouse to the state house.
So it said law enforcement stayed out of their way, but not Kentucky Constable George Hawkins.
The gangsters from Newport wanted to rope him in, shine a bad light on him, try to make him leave him alone.
And when he went missing, all signs pointed to something sinister.
There was no doubt that it was a mob hit. Somewhere at the bottom of the Ohio River, I believe, is George Hawkins' remains.
Constable Hawkins lived with his family in a modest apartment above their business.
He'd been an elected constable for 20-some years.
His daughters remember him sharing duties between the store and the county.
Anything and everything from arrests to serving warrants to evictions, everything a sheriff might do. He had the same power as a sheriff.
It wasn't uncommon for him to get called away, but his daughters knew something wasn't right on an afternoon in April when he called to say he was heading home, but never showed up.
And then we closed the store. We went out driving around everywhere looking to where he might be. Didn't find a thing.
No sign of the man with a footprint on all corners of the county until days later.
We got a call that they had found his car on the banks of the Ohio River in Dayton, Kentucky. The whole car looked like it had been washed down with muddy water. Keys were in the ignition, half a tank of gas. They let us take the car home.
Daughters Judy and Anita say no police agency was asking questions, no detectives digging into their father's disappearance.
We were at a standstill. Nobody talked to us. Nobody had anything.
Not even a private detective would take on the case.
He'd just leave it alone. Just go home and leave it alone. My detective took off, never heard or saw him again.
Nobody investigated, they said, for decades.
Let's start right here.
And then the river washed up something police couldn't ignore.
In 1980, a skull washed up on the banks of the Ohio River south of Newport. It had been crushed on top by a long, deep depression that showed a fatal head wound, as if walloped by a heavy pipe or a tire iron. Detectives believed it was the last remains of Constable George Hawkins. I'm Peter Bronson. I'm the author of Forbidden Fruit, Sin City's Underworld and the Supper Club Inferno.
During his research, Bronson stumbled across the constable's story, finding it fit a theme.
There were numerous people who came to Cincinnati and Newport who went missing and were never found.
Those disappearances likely linked back to the Cleveland Mafia and a terrifying tradition.
At the time, there was what the treatment was called giving them a Newport nightgown, which was to wrap them in chains, attach it to a concrete block, and throw them off a bridge.
When the constable's daughters got word of the waterfront discovery, they dropped everything else to follow the lead.
He had the DNA from us, and we exhumed my grandmother Hawkins to get her DNA. Ended up it didn't match.
It was devastating, they remember. Their chance for answers all but stripped away. Fast forward 4 decades, they're still hanging on to the one piece of their dad still left behind. His badge, hand-delivered years after his disappearance by a member of the Cleveland Mafia.
You have to appreciate just how powerful they were and how corruption was just taken for granted.
I got a lot of questions when I get to heaven.
Family tell us Kentucky State Police has been in touch with them about the case in recent years, but we could not confirm that through the agency. For the Unsolved team, I'm Shay McAllister.